This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Matthews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. I'm super excited to introduce today's guest. Over 20 years of experience, fractional executives in the areas of operations, accounting, technology, sales and marketing, and human resources. Chief Operating Officer, founder at Efficiency. Introducing Mario Lupia. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to talk to you. I love that you have 20 years experience in pretty much everything that gives entrepreneurs a headache, and a lot of visionaries, they don't really know what to do or where to turn to. So excited to dive into that. But I first have to ask you, you've been a fractional COO now for almost 3 years.
Correct.
What's one of the most important lessons you've learned thus far?
I would say for me, transitioning from a chief operating officer of one entity to a fractional where you're working with 2-3 different types of entities at one time is organization, right? Because each entity that you work with at the same time, right, they want 100% of your help. They want 100% of your attention, even though they understand you're working for them on a fractional basis, right? The word fractional goes out of the picture. So for them, they want your time, they want your attention. And for me, I need to present that to each of my clients at the same time. So even though I'm juggling 2 or 3 clients, behind the scenes, when I'm with them, I need to give them 100% of my attention. I need to be there 100% at a time. So organization and being organized is probably the number one lesson that I've learned.
No, it's really great. It's like a tightrope, right?
That's
I mean, a client, it's hard for them to understand fractional. And then you always have what's called, right, scope creep, call it whatever you have, right? Where then they want more time, but then you're like, hey, you got to spend more money. And then they're like,
right.
well, what's included? So how do you then you come from being a full-time, is it a full-time
Correct.
COO in an organization? Now you're managing multiple
Yeah.
clients. I mean, what are some tips and tricks for you that allows you to manage multiple? Because you're dealing with different visionaries, different leadership teams, different styles of
Yeah.
business. How do you keep that organized?
Well, for me, it's a lot of sticky notes on my desk. That's the first thing I do. But realistically, it's right. It's getting when I start an engagement is understanding who I'm working with, what their style is, what the management style is, so I know how to operate with them. Is it a person that needs my attention immediately when they call? I need to pick up the phone, or are they looking to work with me after hours, or are they early morning people? Right. So I'll adjust my schedule throughout the day for that. I also kind of carve out my day to know when to work with everyone. So, if especially if I'm wearing multiple hats, right? What organization I'm working with right now, I kind of wear 3 types of executive leadership. I'm kind of heading up their marketing, I'm heading up their operations, and I'm also heading up their financial management part of it. And when I say financial management, because there's a big difference, which we can touch on later, between that, what I do as a COO from a financial perspective versus a CFO. So in that case, I need to, kind of carve out those 3 leadership roles and kind of, carve out the day. So for 2 hours in the morning, I'm going to work on marketing, do some social media posts, do some LinkedIn. Then I'll spend 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours on the financial management and, work it from there.
So, I mean, who do you typically work with? Are you working with enterprise level clients, or is it mainly entrepreneurial focused clients? Or
So what I found in so far in my fractional world, and especially the world I come from, I primarily come from working in a startup world. So that's where my expertise always lies. Just understanding that working in a startup versus an enterprise company, right? 2 totally different animals. Startup, you're wearing multiple hats, you're rolling up your sleeves, you're, taking out the garbage, and then you're doing the P&L statement the next minute. So for me, it's primarily where I find where a fractional chief operating officer especially comes in is your small and mid-sized business. It's the startups, right, that or don't have the financial matters to bring on top leadership, but obviously they definitely need the help, especially in operations, to kind of lay the basement and lay that foundation to build their company. And then it's secondary, it's that growth company. It's those people that are, now in a growth mode. They need to bring on, maybe they don't have any leadership, or it's usually a single entrepreneur, a single COO, CEO that's kind of trying to juggle everything, but he also has tried to manage the vision and the growth of the company. And at that time, they start getting overwhelmed. And then lastly, for me, I find and it's becoming more and more of a topic. It's people that are starting to phase out of the companies. A lot of times, single entrepreneur, family-run company. Uh, the owner, is someone maybe in his 50s, 60s, wants to start phasing out of the company. Maybe has children or family members that are coming up the ranks, but they're not yet fully ready to kind of take over the company. So I would come in and sit kind of in the middle. So I kind of let that owner entrepreneur start phasing out. I kind of start taking over his responsibilities and helping train up the younger or less experienced people that are eventually going to take over the company.
Now, how do you find these visionaries, or how do you find the entrepreneur that's like, they're in startup mode, they're wearing multiple hats. You've got to be able to penetrate them somehow as a fractional. And there's a lot of headwinds. First, the whole fractional
Mhm.
word, I didn't even know about it
You know,
until like 6 months ago when I started a fractional CMO
right,
company. Because my first mind was like, how can anybody be effective, right? Fractionally.
correct,
Like, you got to be here, you got to feel it, you got to buy into the
totally.
culture. But then the reality is, as I started to think about it, like, I've hired many leadership people in the past, and I started telling people they kind of only work fractionally anyway. If you think about it, I mean, everybody now since COVID, it's kids, it's this. I'm on the road, but like, how do you have that conversation or meet these visionaries where they're at, to even let them know, like, hey, this is a solution out there.
That's probably the number one and best question, and it's probably the hardest part of it. And I think for a lot of
Yep.
fractionals, for myself, my career started in the sales world, right? I was a sales and biz dev guy, right? That's what I did for many years. So for me, I have that kind of in my arsenal, so I kind of understand how to sales, to cold calling, and so forth. There's a lot of fractionals that never were in a sales role, right? So it's even harder for themselves. But,
Yep.
finding potential candidates is definitely the hardest. Referrals, probably the number one way to get additional people. But then, that's just, like you said, the headwinds. That's just the start of the battle, right? Getting in there, first letting them, it seems like everyone understands the concept that they kind of need help, but making them understand what you're going to do for them, how you're going to do it, how a fractional is different than a consultant, right? Is always a big question. Oh, so you're a consultant? Well, no. And you have to try to kind of understand them by taking them through the process of how you're kind of different from someone that's going to work on a temporary consulting basis, and that you're really going to actually be, like you said, all in and part of the team. So it's probably the biggest challenge of coming in, as a fractional. I'm sure you have the same thing. We know in our head exactly what we do, what we provide, and we see the advantages of coming in and what we can do for that particular company. Uh, but to make them understand and really sell that and hit home, it takes a process.
Yeah, because to me, like, there's this foundational process, right? Or like the first, call it 30, 60, 90 days of just getting involved in the engagement.
Correct.
But I think visionaries, because I am one, we're kind of lunatics because it's like, hey, I've already paid you your first month fractional payment or consulting agreement. Like, what have you done for me? Like, where are we making traction? So like, how do you set that up for success, whether it's a startup or just a visionary of like, hey, like, is there a time frame of like, here's a checklist of all the things that we have to get done? Because I know visionaries are
Yeah.
like, if I'm spending this, I got to get this. Otherwise, what are we doing? How do you throttle that? How do you manage that behavior?
Yeah, you have to lay it out from day one, right? You have to set expectations. I do that with I kind of have a business plan that I put in place. Once my evaluations are done, we sit down and we go into an engagement mode, right? I develop my own divisionary spreadsheet. So I take division by division. I take anywhere from 5 to 10 points for each division of things that, from an operational perspective, should be or are they being handled, right? And then we do a checkbox of, is it an immediate need, a short-term need, or a long-term need? So, for instance, let's take my evaluation of their HR department, right? It's a entrepreneur. He's managing his HR team. He's managing HR. Doesn't have an HR manager, or using an outside company to handle that, right? So come in. The first thing is, do you have a company handbook? No. Right. Do you have any policy and procedures? No. Right. Do you have a hiring process? No. Right. Okay. Those become short-term immediate needs, right? We have to get that under control. If you want to start hiring and growing the company, right, we need to get that under control first and foremost. Right. And that's kind of how I do it, and be able to set those expectations as I engage. So we kind of lay out the plan of like, okay, great. Here's each division we're going to be working on. Here's your short, mid-range, and long-term resources that we're going to be working on, and kind of gives them a good roadmap to understand where my focus is going to be. The biggest trigger also is, especially for a chief operating officer, especially from a fractional standpoint, right? There's different fractional leaders that have different trust levels, right? So whether it be a CFO or a COO is going to have to also establish a very big trust factor, right? Because I'm going to be more privy to sensitive information, sensitive details that entrepreneur or that CEO has to kind of give to me for me to do my job. And that becomes a challenge sometimes too. If they're a micromanager, it's not that they don't trust me as a person, right? But just relinquishing, hey, here's the bank accounts, right? Giving access
Yeah.
to all my money. It's, sometimes you have to get through that trust act.
It's interesting you say that because I've been in situations myself with my team where the client that we're engaging with, they might have a CFO full
Mhm.
time, or they might have somebody. Then all of a sudden, like we come as a fractional, or you come in as a fractional COO, and we're like so delicate with those first introductions and handoffs because people feel threatened, especially a COO, because typically in an entrepreneurial run company, the COO is like second in
Right.
command to the CEO, right? And now everybody on the team's like, oh, wait a minute, how much power does this fractional have, right? How do I work with
Correct.
them? Like, how do you manage that? Like, what, do you allocate time with the teams and make them feel at ease, or how do you engage the other, whether they're executives, leaders, or managers in the company? How do you introduce yourself to that engagement?
Yeah. So again, it's expectations. So if it's a CEO, right, the first thing I'm doing is letting him know that that's part of the plan. Is first and foremost, after I engage with them and get their checkbox, and get we move on to, do they have a leadership team, right? If they have a leadership team, right, a CFO might have a CFO or someone else alongside him in a leadership role, right? That's the second level that I need to sit with them, make them feel very comfortable about what I'm going to do, what I'm going to bring in. And then lastly, yeah, the employees, right, is getting engaged with them, getting engaged in a level. And usually I do that by letting them know that, I'm here to make change, but change has to be a group consensus, right? So before any changes are made, I'm going to meet with those team members. I'm going to understand their concerns. I'm going to understand, are they buying into the changes that are being made? Not always do they, right? And sometimes changes have to be made, even though everyone doesn't sign on. But I try to get as much consensus as possible and keep everybody involved in the process, so they don't look at me as a threat, but they look at me as a help.
No, I love that. I also think, for me, it's like you want to make them champions of
Hmm.
you or the fractional, because when that CEO visionary loses their mind at any given
Right.
point, right, and they want to go in a different
Yeah.
direction, you want the team saying, Mario's the man.
Yeah.
Like, come back to reality. Like, he's a great guy. Like, I've noticed that because what's interesting, like, I'm a pure visionary. I love COOs or fractional COOs because we're kind of like yin yang together. But I know, like, just from my own experience, like, I can literally be going this direction and completely yank the company in another
Right.
direction. I used to do that. I don't do that now, but it's just interesting. So, like, that's a big part of what we do is we get buy-in from the leadership team or other managers in the company just for that
Yeah.
reason. And a lot of them,
Yeah.
yeah. Go
No, I'm
ahead,
sorry.
sorry.
And then, what I find also is because you're kind of an outsider, people actually open up to you. I've had tons of people I work with. They'll call me up, or they'll be like, and they're kind of they start. I become the psychiatrist, and they start venting to me because they don't look at me as a threat, right? They don't look at me as, oh, he's going to go, and it actually helps because it opens up another world that I'm able to bring back to the visionary and share that with them, and with the hopes that they kind of have an open mind to understand that, hey, people are complaining, but is this could be a problem. This is an issue with the company and something that should be addressed. So a lot of times, so you're right. Once you get the buy-in from the employees, and they start venting to you, or they start telling you about the woes of the company, and you kind of start championing their cause, then they start looking
Yep.
you as a champion. So yeah, perfect point.
Well, what I love about, the fractional world, like talking to a CEO or a visionary is to say, like, to your point, you're not an
Mhm.
employee and employees are very costly, right? And then once you bring an employee, they're kind of hard to get rid of, or you have this. So I think as a fractional, it's like, I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. Cause I think that employee employer relationship, there's still this like yes men mentality through
Yeah.
managers, leadership, like whatever. I love the fractional side. It's like, that doesn't exist.
Right.
You
I,
know, I'm not your employee. I don't care. You pay me on results, not to kiss your
right.
ass. Um, but that's awesome. So from a and then the vulnerability side, right? Like, hey, I'm not here to threat. I'm not on payroll. Like, I'm here just to improve systems, process, people, technology, help grow the company. I think that's
Yeah. I
great.
think you get, sometimes you do get to challenges, right? Because sometimes they're a little
Absolutely.
pushback, they're a little resistant. And, it's the conversation I have is like, guys, listen, I said, what I tell a lot of these visionaries is you might not like everything I tell you, but understand everything I tell you is to help you in the company.
Yep. No, that's great. Now, what's a typical engagement? And what I'm trying to ask for is like anybody that's listening has an entrepreneurial
Mhm.
company. I had an experience with a good friend of mine. I did a little fractional stuff for him, and he like behind him was this huge wall, and he wrote down all of his problems of the day, of the month, of the
Right.
year, stuff that he just procrastinates, never gets to. And I kind of started laughing at him, like not to be rude, but I said, "Dude, you're missing like the key thing here." He's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Imagine you got rid of all these problems yourself," which you never will because he's a pure
Right.
visionary like me. I'm like, "You're just going to create more, and things are going to evolve and change." Like the number one thing that needs to be on this wall is hire an operator. Like literally take all these issues and dump them on the operator and work through
Mhm.
together to get this stuff done. But he goes, I cannot afford a COO.
Right.
And I said, there's a fractional. Like, how do you educate visionaries, or like how do we educate the world and entrepreneurs about this fractional? Because I think there's still this like, is it gonna work? Or, what if your vibe doesn't work, or in 3 months they feel like the time's wasted with the investment because things aren't clicking. What do you do on your end to ensure it does?
Listen, I did. There's been engagements that haven't worked, but I found for myself, it's just the buy-in wasn't there, right? It was the visionary that he just either he didn't buy into the changes because he felt that they didn't need to be done, even though
Yep.
consensus was that it did, or he was so much of a control micromanager visionary that he just wasn't comfortable with just relinquishing the power to someone else. And we say the word power, it's not really power, right? It's responsibilities, right? It's like, hey, I'm gonna take all of this off of you, right? You're gonna manage, you're gonna know that I kind of understand your vision, what your goals are. I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna manage the whole process so you can keep running and growing the company to the next level, right? And when that happens, but it really is magical, right? It just works. It works so well. It works so well. And then, but when you have those bumps, or you have that visionary that just doesn't let you, I personally will not take on engagement if I don't think I'm going to be successful, right? So I'm not going to do it just because it's a paycheck, right? Or do that. If it's someone that wants engagement, if someone's coming in and they want a particular operation style, I'm not trained in EOS, understand it, but I'm not, right? If someone says, I'm not going to say, yeah, I can implement EOS. I'm just not, because I just don't do that. So I'll kind of pass on the engagement.
Got it. No, it makes a lot of sense. So you have a lot of years experience being on the inside as a COO. Now you're a fractional, so you kind of have a well-rounded. I want to ask you, like, what do you see now? Like, rub the crystal ball, 2024. There's a lot going on in the economy. AI is the hot topic. Like, what do you see in terms of what's changing, or like, is there some types of technology out there for efficiencies, or like what you're used to in your past experience, how do you see the future evolving with all this technology and AI and all these things that are out there and available today?
I like, yeah. I mean, the first thing is all the technology, especially AI, is amazing. But I think that people can't. It just gets overwhelming, right? Because every single day there's a new AI company. Every single day there's a new technology company. There's a new app. There's a new software tool. A company that I'm actually engaging with right now. Prior to me coming in, they had a similar type of fractional operations person came in. He was more enterprise level, and he was implementing just a ton of different tools and softwares and things, and they're all efficient. They all provide efficiency. They all provide some kind of help. But at the end of the day, it's an added cost to the company, and it gets overwhelming, right? So you have Slack, and we're doing Teams, and we're doing this, and we're doing this AI tool, and we have, perfect example is that working with in the last 2 months, note takers have become a big part of
Oh
video calls.
gosh,
I was on a video call the other day. There was 6 note takers. There were more.
that's
There
amazing.
were more note takers than there were people on the call, right? And it's like, just no, we don't need 9,000 note takers. Like, it's not right. We're not. This is not the highest level of meetings, right? Let's have one note taker. Then people drop off. The note taker doesn't drop off. So I think that kind of understanding what tools are needed, and implementing the right tools without overwhelming just because it's the hottest and newest and latest things. Because you have to understand it. Like, AI is a perfect example, right? Everyone's like, AI. Okay, why are we using AI? Where does it help? I'm sure you've been, for myself, from a marketing perspective, right? Because I don't do what you do on a full-time basis, right? So if I'm helping write contact for a website, or I'm doing a LinkedIn post, absolutely, I'm going to use the AI tools to help. But you have to understand that you have to go through the process, right? You have to proofread it. You have to check it. You have to put it into your own language. So it's, the tool is there, but there's a lot of extra steps that are involved in operating them.
Yeah, I feel like as a visionary, almost related to like walking into Home Depot. Like, you could probably build an entire house by going in Home
Right.
Depot and having all the tools and doing everything. But the reality is, like, I'm not gonna use any of those tools properly. Um, and I think that what's super important, I think you hit on a little bit, is just what are you trying to
Right.
accomplish? Like, what's the end goal? I think a lot of people get lost in that journey around, like, what are you trying to do? I get all people ask me all the time, how much should I invest here? What should I do here? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, what do you
Right.
want? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, what's the 3-year target for the company? Like, what's top line revenue, bottom line revenue? You mentioned, like, I love EOS. I'm all
Yeah.
about
Yeah. It's
EOS.
great.
I implemented that in my company because it's simple, and it's just 1 plus 1 is 2.
Exactly.
And I always tell visionary entrepreneurs when they're like stuck, I'll take out the VTO, which in EOS is called the Vision Traction Organizer. So it talks about your core values, your target market, 3-year picture, 1 year, all that stuff. And I guess everything on that document, it's just really hard, I think, for a visionary to take all that information and put it down in paper. Because once you put it in paper, it's like, here it is. This is what we're trying to accomplish. I'm like, once you get there, then a lot of fun can happen, because now I'll even tell a visionary, you need that before you start talking to an
Right.
operator, because an operator needs to see that vision to say, can I make this a reality? Is this visionary like way out to lunch? But so how do you what's your tempo with an entrepreneurial group? I mean, is it like a kind of like a level 10 meeting or a weekly meeting, or like how do you keep your engagements on track?
Yeah, so and you touched on a good point that touch on it well that comes up a lot too, right? Is the visionary, comes in, had a got engaged with a visionary, and he just had that list, right? We're going to do this. We're regional now. We're going to go national. We're going to open up 8 offices. I want to be, someone said to me, we want to be a $40 million company, and then you get engaged, and this is, kind of where it says like get engaged, right? And then now you're embedded with the company, right? You're really seeing the true pain points, right? Fully understand it. And then you look at it and you realize that a lot of that visionary, what he wants or he or she wants, right, doesn't equate because to your point, they don't know what the end result is. So then can start asking those difficult questions of, hey, you told me this year, where do you want to be again in sales? We want to be 10 million. Okay, great. Right now we're 40% behind that more, right? So you're looking at getting to maybe about 5 or 6 million, right? How are you going? What in your mind or your vision? How are you going to get to 10 million? And a lot of times they don't have that answer. They didn't know, right? Because
Right.
they're bringing up goals, but they don't have the process to get there. And again, that's where I kind of really hit home with them of my role and right what it is. That's my goal, right? Is to understand your vision and to sit down and put a plan in place. A silly analogy to that is when I was a full-time COO, we had a big call center. We had big call centers, 300 people call centers. And it was always a process to do anything, right? And one morning the CEO called me up. He said, "Let's get pizza for the call center today. Just call it now. Gets pizza." And I said, "We have 300 people in there, right? And it's not a matter of calling the local pizzeria down the block and just ordering a couple of pizzas for like a little meeting. It's a whole process, right? We have to order how. We probably need 35 pizzas, which probably need to be ordered 3 days in advance. We have to make sure the team is there to set up the tables to serve the pizza. And we need to, this is so the visionary, right? He's looking at the end. This is what I want. Let's do it. Right. And then I have to step in and say, okay, great. We have to put a plan. Let me put the plan in place for you. How we're going to get from A to Z.
That's a really good example because as you're doing that, I mean that's how my brain reacts. But like sometimes that could be a negative, like, hey, ordering pizza for 300 people might sound like a great thing
Right.
to do, but if that's not a flawless
Right.
experience, that might actually even leave a negative impact.
Correct.
If 25% of the people don't get a
Right.
piece of pizza, or even better, which really makes me mad as a visionary, I'm trying to like overcome this. It's somebody's gonna say, "Oh, they didn't order the pizza I
Right.
like,"
Right.
or and so all these things start to happen. So it's funny that COO can look at that and say, "Okay, like how do we get this done flawlessly? How is this going to make sense?" That's the rub, I think, for the visionary and COO. It's okay. How can you have the conversation and push back, right?
Yep.
Because anybody else in the organization is going to say, "Yep, let's get pizza. Let's go. What a great idea. You're the smartest guy in the room." But somebody's got to be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, pump the brakes."
Yeah. I said that one time, one time I worked a very long time, very close, I had a great experience for many years with a CEO. And, for some reason it was like, I was like the stepchild, right? I wasn't getting the love that everyone else was getting. And I used to sit there and say, I don't understand, I'm his right hand man. I've been in there every day. I got his back. I'm doing this. And one of the other leaders said to me one day, he said, you know what the realistic reason is because when we sit in that room, everyone's shaking their head yes, right? To your point earlier, he said, but you're the guy that says no. He said, and no one wants to hear no. So that's why that's why you're not getting the love, even though you're doing it for the right reasons, and he probably knows the right reasons. No one here when 7 people are shaking their head yes, and you say no, it doesn't sit very well for you.
No, it's funny. I totally get that, and for me, it's like, how do you what are some big red flags where you see a visionary entrepreneur where they're like ready now to have a conversation? Because to your point, they need to be ready
Mhm.
or they need to sort of understand what it's going to look like. How do you set them up for war, right? Or engagement to say, hey, this is how it's going to work. Cause visionaries don't like to be told no. So it's a big
Yeah.
change. It's a huge change from what they're used to.
Yeah, I mean, usually right off the bat, the first and foremost things, right, is revenue, sales, profitability, right? So it all comes back to financials, right? So I was talking about earlier, and that's why I think, for myself, being a CEO and also being an entrepreneurial CEO, I owned my own company,
Yep.
is that the financials play a big role in this, right? It's understanding, right, the revenue that's coming in, the profitability, right? And that's kind of where I show the most value right off the bat, right? Because at the end of the day, right, I need to keep this owner business, right? So it's a lot harder story. It's a different story, right? If the revenue's there, the growth's amazing, right? We're growing 20, 30% year over year. Then it becomes, okay, I'm bringing you in to help me grow, right? I need more manpower. We need more people. We need more processes in place. We need to get, we're just on a roll, right? A lot of times for me, I find it's the opposite, right? It's people that are struggling, right? They've come to the point now they're losing money. They're not profitable. Revenue isn't growing, right? And they start getting stuck, right? What's going on here, right? And a lot of times it's just operational efficiency, right? Which is my whole reason I started the company, right? Is a lot of times people will say, well, regardless, you're a fixed cost, you're overhead cost. That's what a COO is, right? An operational cost to the bottom line. And I'm like, no, you have to reverse engineer it, right? I get it. The salesperson's the quarterback of the team, right? He's making the touchdown throws, he's bringing the money. But if I come in and I negotiate a contract, right? I sit down with a vendor and I just save the company 30% on a contract negotiation, right? I just saved the company $50,000. Well, that's $50,000 that goes back to the bottom line, right? So look at it that, it's a reverse engineering. I personally, I look at it as I'm a salesperson from a different perspective, but
Yeah.
I'm ultimately generating that revenue in some a different capacity, but ultimately that's what I'm doing. So I don't look at operations people as the chief operating officers, especially being a fixed cost on the P&L.
So you bring up a good point. You have a lot of sales experience too, and I would imagine like most visionary entrepreneurs, like it's founder led sales, right? To a certain point.
Hmm.
Like, what in your experience, how do you combat that, or what's the smoothest handoff in your experience around? All right, at some point, the founder has to get out of the way or pass that torch. What's your experience there?
Well, sales, it has to be an ultimate sales process, right? And that's the hardest thing for me to sell to an entrepreneur, right? Is you need to bring in salespeople, right? Is there going to be a cost involved? Absolutely. But, salespeople and sales is the heart and soul of your company. They're going to generate the revenue. They're going to bring it in. Maybe you're here to bring in some high level opportunities. That's fantastic if you have some great relationships, but even those relationships have to be nurtured, right? So bringing in a sales team, I love bringing in two levels. I love bringing in someone in a senior level that's industry related, that's going to kind of hit the ground running, right? Show value right off the bat. Um, Generate a good compensation package to try to woo them into the company and have them make some impact right off the bat. And then, bringing in some junior level, right? People that they're just gonna be that guerrilla marketing. They're gonna get on the phones. They need a little training. Again, having an operations person in place, right, kind of takes that off of the visionary, because as a visionary, you don't want to sit there and start training a salesperson on, right, the company does, the product does, right? But I kind of take that off. I'll take that on as a responsibility. And someone that's going to, pound the phone, make those calls, generate those interests, and, start building a good sales team around there. And back to your point about before with tools, a CRM is just a really important part of that sales process. Just having a tool in place where you can manage your prospecting, you can manage your prospects, you can manage your marketing to those prospects. I think is extremely important.
It's mind blowing to me how many businesses don't have a CRM.
Amazing amount of pumping that don't have it, you know. Ye-
But if you have a company that's like, hey, they're founder led, they're doing okay, they want to bring you in, they need help on the sales side. What is that process? I mean, are you talking about like a junior level salesperson, they call like an SDR, somebody who's setting appointments for that more senior person? Like how do you see that relationship
Yeah,
working?
so that's interesting, right? So I'm sure and I'm sure a lot of people relate to this. The number one single message I get on LinkedIn every single day, I get messaged 2 to 3 times a day, are someone's going to help me, right, with sales, right? They're going to help me. They're going to generate prospects. I've done my life. So many companies out there, both onshore and offshore, right? I've engaged once or twice with them to person had little success with it, right? So it is it's a very good question, right? Do you go with some of these kind of virtual companies that are just out there just trying to do appointment setting? Or do you actually hire someone on a junior level, uh, recent college graduate, someone that just wants to be in sales, has that sales ability, right? Good talker, going to put the time in, going to make the phone calls, going to learn the process, right? And have someone in place because they're going to need help, right? They're going to bring in the small sales, but they're going to land a couple of whales or a couple of big fish, and they're going to need someone to help them rail them in. So whether it be the visionary or be myself, someone on a management level that's gonna manage the process and manage that person, as opposed to bringing in someone that's right senior experience, right? They're in their own world. They don't really need much help. They're just going to go out there and just you know hopefully be successful and bring in some good clients to the company.
What's interesting is I see that, it's 2024. I kind of got started in the entrepreneurial world in 2009 where the phone, right? iPhone just came out. The phone was like used a lot. I see now that people just want to avoid the phone at all
Mhm.
costs. I see myself doing it. Like if I get random numbers not out of my contact list, like I'm not answering the phone. I probably get 100 messages a day on
Yeah.
LinkedIn on all these people that are going to completely change my life. I've still yet to find like one good company, honestly, like that can actually do what they say they're going to do, like whether it's set appointments, like it's just, I don't know if these companies just think like they want to get a couple grand and that's it, and then just do that over and
Yeah.
over. Like that's the business model. If that's the business model, they're probably doing great
Right.
because I've yet to find anything that actually works. But how do you see like that? With the environment changing like that. I mean, my kids have iPhones. They don't call out. It's Snapchat.
Oh,
That's all they use is Snapchat, and like they're only communicating with people that are within their sphere. In TikTok, and they get all their ideas on what they want from TikTok.
yeah.
Like, how does that apply to like the old school? I call it old school, which is banging the phone, doing the traditional things that get biz. I see that changing in a massive way.
It's so true, and especially now more so in the company that I've engaged with recently, right? Because you have remote workforces, right? A lot of times, to your point, it goes to their cell phone versus where it's old days, right? It's going into a main number, it's going to an IVR, right? At least you're getting routed to the right person or directed to the right person. And nowadays, that doesn't exist. That whole phone routing system, right? It's going most people are working off of their cell phones. And I agree. I'm the same. I get tons of phone calls. If it's something I don't recognize, I'm usually not answering it in there. So that's a really good question that I don't know if I have a great answer for. I think where it comes to play is more of what you're an expert in, right? Is starting to build real good, strong, multi-level marketing approaches, right? Try to reach those candidates, try to engage with them in some way, shape, or form, whether it be through a drip email campaign, which again, still another issue, right? Because the amount of emails that come in. But the multi-level marketing approach, I think at least, right? I do a drip email campaign. I've done a LinkedIn post. Now you see my LinkedIn post. You saw an email from me, and maybe some other resources that all of a sudden, you've seen me at a trade show, and all of a sudden, hopefully it starts resonating of like, oh, I need to find out more about this company, or at least when you reach out to them, hey, I'm from so and so, and it's like, oh yeah, I've been seeing your LinkedIn posts, or I got an email from you, and it becomes a good challenge that I don't think I don't have a solid answer. When you have the answer, let me know. I don't have it myself yet.
Still figuring that
Right.
out. I rack my brain as a visionary on that a lot. So how can people get a hold of you, right? I mean, there's a lot of visionaries out there that are kind of whirlwinds in their mind that have to take the first step. My assumption is you just have that first kind of conversation with them to kind of see where they're at. But what's the easiest way to get in contact with you to talk about what you do?
Yeah. So, right. So I have a, profile on LinkedIn, right? Because, I try to get on there, try to get my message across pretty daily on kind of what I provide or what I can provide. My website, which is efficiency.com. You get some more information on there, but, just reaching out to me, let's jump on a call. I'd love to, speak to you, let you know, kind of understand what your needs are, what you're looking for, how someone in a fractional role like myself can come in and help the visionary, help your company, whether it be growth
Yeah.
needs, whether it be cost saving needs, whatever you're looking for. We're pretty versatile in offering different types of solutions depending on what the company's needs are. And for myself and for the viewers out there, what I like to do is we offer a 100% free evaluation. We go through a 5-step operational growth and efficiency kind of process, which we do. It's all free of charge. There's no cost to have those conversations. And then even once we kind of agree on an engagement, typically our engagements, we like to do a 60 to 90 day to start, simply because it takes that long to get the process going. But there's no commitment, no contracts, no long-term contracts. Um, we grow with you. So we start out at a certain level of engagement. And if that level either increases or decreases, we're totally on board to reduce or increase that engagement level. And then also, like the offer today, we're offering, love to offer 5% off of, our first month's, retainer for anyone that we ultimately engage with you guys.
Cool. Well, hey, Mario, I really appreciate it. Keep helping those visionaries. We need it. Uh, keep fighting. So thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Wes. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Mario. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.